Because data is used quite extensively by CFOs or CVOs in order to add value to the business, then every small business should have a data strategy, right? Hi, my name's Alicia Randall and I am a fractional CFO, and I also train new and inspiring CFOs, particularly in the startup and scale up space. And I wanted to talk about data strategy. So it's not the most interesting topic, but this week I was part of a panel with Talent Edge and there was a big discussion about data and data strategy. And interestingly, there was a data expert on the panel who's not an accountant. So it was very interesting to hear her perspective as well, particularly because data is just become such a big part of businesses over the last 20 years. But what she's finding is that most businesses don't have a data strategy. A business strategy, yes, but a data strategy, perhaps not. The topic was, as I said, about data strategy, but also about a CVO. And if you haven't heard of a CVO, it stands for Chief Value Officer. It's not really used here in the UK yet. It is used in some places in the States, but essentially it's saying that a CFO is becoming more of a CVO. So instead of sitting in the back corner going through finances and being much more of a support function, a CVO is that value adding, being part of that commercial and strategic decisions. If you have seen probably any of my videos before or read any of my articles before or joined one of our workshops, you probably have heard me bang on about the fact that in order to be a strong finance leader, you do need to be out of the shadows, out of the just looking at things that have happened in the past and having that seat at the table, being part of the commercial team as far as building the strategic direction and making strategic decisions. So this shouldn't come as a surprise. It's just a different terminology, shall we say. So thinking about data strategy, having a real in-depth data strategy is probably something that in a large corporate, they can really throw a team at. They have data lakes, they have a data team, they have infinite a number of business intelligence and analysts. But of course, if you work in a startup or scale up, you do not have those resources at your fingertips. So instead of going through, data lakes, it's the term data lake was used a few times in this panel, quite rightly, because the other members of the panel worked for much larger businesses than what I did. I thought it's probably worthwhile things to think about as a starting point for a startup or scale up and things that can be implemented quite quickly. So the first thing that I always look at when I start with a startup or scale up as a fractional CFO is the definition of the KPIs. Now, this may sound a little bit boring and potentially it can be, but I do find that if this exercise isn't done, particularly at the early stage, you will find that there will be so many versions of one metric. The most perfect one, I think I've talked about this before in quite a recent post, is active customers. Generally, you'll find that finance, the commercial team and the tech team will have 3 different definitions for this one KPI. So you definitely need to spend the time understanding the data, understanding the definitions. There may be a situation, well, I will say most companies will have multiple definitions of customers, but it's just classifying them the same way. So you may have customer in general, active customer, dormant customer, all these different types of categories, and that's fine. Having different categories are fine as long as it's consistent across the business. So when everybody's putting their board pack together, everybody is talking about the same thing. The second one that's maybe a little bit harder and a bit more longer term is moving away from Google Sheets. So I can say that nearly all of my clients that I'm currently working with, not all of them, but nearly, their data is still captured in Google Sheets. And you can just imagine the kind of problems with this. There's lots of human error. People can type in there very easily. The history is generally lost. So it's really trying to move away from Google Sheets and trying to make this a bit of a priority. It does cost money, of course, and sometimes, throwing more money into a marketing campaign seems like a better idea. However, if you are creating a marketing campaign and what you're focusing on within that marketing campaign is based on the data or the analysis that's been done on the data that is in these Google Sheets, the analysis may not be accurate, and therefore the marketing campaign may not be as successful as it could be. So it's really identifying what the key data needs are, what is essential for the business, both from an operational point of view, but also decision making. So you really need to assess, how is this data currently being captured? How is it being stored? And then how is it being used? Once you've done that initial analysis, then you can look for software and potentially additional team member that can suit your specific needs. So, I mean, most companies I work with have a CRM, but a CRM, if not, ERP potentially not, but elements of it, so the operational side of things. But there may be, a data warehouse, for example, or within the cloud, a way of capturing the data properly and looking at these analyses. So then looking at reporting tools, data reporting tools such as Tableau, Power BI, and Looker, for example. There's plenty, but they're the ones that I've come across with startups or scale-ups. And then you need to also think about whether that software is going to be scalable. So if you're working for a startup or scale-up that is showing significant growth, the earlier you do this data cleansing, data review, the better. But also anything you implement, you need to make sure that it would deal with any volume of growth. And once you've looked at that, then you do need to think about data governance. So clear policies and procedures for data entry, for maintenance, and then also for access. And a big part of that is training the team so that the team understands the data integrity, but also they know how to use the new software properly. So that, it's not unusual to have plenty of teams, particularly commercial teams and finance teams, just logging into reporting tools and just running various reports and then making decisions off them. The decisions are made are so important, and the data can be interpreted in so many different ways. So making sure that there's proper training and consistency across the business is really important. So part of that then is integrating a data strategy within the business strategy. So this Liz, who was the data specialist that was on the panel, she was really, really trying to hone down that having a data strategy within your business strategy is like one of the most important things that needs to be added, but especially because data has been so important over the last 20 years. So thinking about all of those different elements is how you would look at integrating and creating a data strategy. So the things that you would look at then is your informed decision making. So how do you make more informed decisions that therefore would drive the business growth? How can you use data analytics and AI to get those insights and forecasting trends? Making sure that your data strategy, aligns with your business strategy. So if your goal is to improve customer retention, then focus on capturing and analyzing customer feedback and behavior is therefore really important. And then often, managing that data strategy, who is going to have that under their remit? So often it sits under the CFO or the CTO. Or sometimes if you have a commercial officer, chief commercial officer, it sits under there. So making sure that there is a person that looks after this. Who's the right person? It depends on who the company. This question was kind of posed during the panel, and the recommendation was whoever's the most passionate. whoever is the person that's going to dedicate the time to make sure that the data strategy is created, maintained, communicated, and understood across the company. So that was the topic of conversation this week. I thought it was really interesting on that next step. So thinking about having clean data, consistent KPIs, and trying to move away from Google Sheets was my contribution to the conversation, particularly because I was the only representative as a startup or scale up. But looking ahead and thinking about preparing these startups and scale ups for that larger corporation, and therefore including a data strategy within the business strategy, I thought was really interesting. So I wanted to bring that to you today. Hopefully you find that interesting, and there's a few things to take away there. Again, as usual, this video will have an article that I'll link below that talks about this in a little bit more detail, so you've got something tangible to take away with you. So hopefully you found that useful. I mentioned workshops and leadership guides at the beginning. I'll leave the links for both of those below so you can check those out. Please let me know if you found this useful at all, or if there's any topics you'd like me to talk about. I'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next week. Cheers.